Hello, thank you for joining the CaFÉ webinar. We'll get started here. We'll be covering the ins and outs of application statuses, define and briefly explain each status so you know what they mean, and we'll show you how you can utilize different application statuses to your benefit. We'll also go over this information in the order of when you're most likely to use them in your call and jurying process. So the key items we will cover today are the definitions of application statuses used at each stage of the call process, how to use certain application statuses to allow an artist to make changes, and rules that may apply to them. We'll also talk about how different application statuses can be seen publicly by the artist and which ones those are. Let's start by reviewing what application statuses mean overall, where you will find those applications, and how you can change the status of an application. We'll begin in the Events Management tab. Once you select your event, you'll be able to see the table of all application statuses and how many entries are within each one. So here's the table here. Click on the box of the status to see the applications below. And you can also use this search box here to find the applicant with a certain status, or select Search All here to see what status the applicant is currently marked in. Next to the application ID number, each application has the drop-down menu where you'll select a different status to change it. You could change it to something here. If you select the status here, make sure to click Save Change at the bottom after selecting a new status to save the change. To change the status of all applications in the same group, you can find the Move All Applicants to the New Status tool at the bottom of the page here. So moving on, if you need to use the Move All Applications to receive status, you can use that here. So changes to the application statuses are recorded and can be seen by clicking on the Status History button, which is right next to under Notes. Once clicked, this will pull up a pop-up window, and it'll show you the statuses changes of that application and show you who made the changes when. So you'll see here this application has changed that time. It's also helpful to know when they might have started it. So now let's talk about each status and what they mean. I will define them in the order you're most likely to use them in your call and jury process. That being said, you are able to use any status at any point depending on your workflow. When an artist submits their application, they will always first appear in the Receive status, which is where we are now. As the applications come in, you will see them in this status and be able to view them by clicking on Receive. So remember that if you set your jury type to Jury by Artwork, the application submitted by one artist will be separated into individual submissions on this list. So I will switch to this other call we have that is Jury by Artwork and go to our Receive status. The first line of information will include their transaction information, and then the second line will not. So this is because this person, Katie Romano here, submitted two pieces, but when it was submitted, since it's Jury by Artwork, it was split up into two separate applications here. So you can see that Lauren submitted one. Down here, this person submitted three, so we have the first and then the two additional pieces. This will show you what the applications kind of look like split up when you go to this Receive status. And artists are able to see on their side too that the application has been received. So looking at our artist account, which I'm about to time out, but here we go. You can see that this artist submitted their applications and their statuses are marked as received. From here, they can review their application, but they cannot go back and make any changes. All right. So while almost all submitted applications appear in the Receive status on the back end, I'm going to switch back to our other call. There is one exception to this rule. If you accept check payments for your entry fees, and if an artist selects this payment method at checkout, the application will appear in the status called awaiting payment by check. So again, if an artist selects this check payment at checkout, they will appear in the awaiting payment by check status. So you'll see here that the transaction information in the applications will show you the check number that they entered at checkout right here. And once you receive the check, you'll have to manually put your awaiting payment by check statuses into the receive status. So here we have a couple that are awaiting payment by check. You will also see an internal status drop-down menu to keep track of the checks themselves. And the menu does not change the status of the application overall. And even sometimes this gets a little finicky, but you'll have to just change the status on the application to received once you have the check in front of you. And save change. And you'll see here that they're now on the bottom. And you can also just change this to received and it'll save. So that'll help you keep track of any check payments that you have coming in and help you keep yourself organized. You'll want to make sure you have gone through all of your awaiting payment by check statuses and move the applications you received checks for to the receive status, or they will not be included in the jury process. So another status that will be helpful while your call is open is the incomplete status. And yep, I'm the right one. When an application is marked as incomplete, an artist must go back to their application, make any necessary changes, and then resubmit their entry. Let's say an artist comes to you before your call's deadline date and asks to update their information on their application. Assuming you approve that they make such a change, you would change the status of the application to incomplete. So here, let's use our artist here, Katie Romano, as an example. They asked to update their artist statement, let's say, so I will just change their status to incomplete and click Save. As you can see on their artist side, when I refresh their page, their entry on the My CaFÉ Entries page has changed from received to incomplete. They will then be able to click Modify to access their application, and they can make changes to their artist statement or any other info. Say they submit a change here, and we can go down and save. So note here that this call is set up as jury by artwork. I will actually go back and show you. It's actually set up as jury by artist, so they will be able to remove or add any art pieces within the 1 to 6 here. They can add or remove anything. However, if a call is set up as jury by artwork, the artist will only be able to swap their image for another and not be able to add or remove samples. Question here, do they get an email that says they're changed to complete? The answer is no. They do not get a notification automatically. You'll have to be in contact with them that you have changed their application to incomplete, and then that will tell them that they have access to their application. They can go in there and make those changes. So let's see, once they're satisfied with their application, they save and confirm that their entry can go back to received. Their application here, so they'll just make changes received, yes, change to received, go back and refresh this. Sometimes I actually realized when setting up this webinar that this sometimes doesn't refresh that well. So you'll have to be in contact with the artist. You can see here that they're back into incomplete. So, you know, if they do have a little bit of issues, you can always contact us, or you can just, if you know that they've made their changes and actually did save, you just put them manually right back into received. So using the incomplete status is helpful if you decide you need to require additional materials from your artist, such as a resume or bio or anything. While we recommend that you avoid changing your requirements after you open your call, you can still make changes in your application editor. Just notify your artist that you're making that change. If you have a big group of people in your received status here, you'll have to let everyone know, so that's up to you. But then once you notify them, you would just go into your received statuses and make them incomplete. You would have to change each of the statuses incomplete here and save change. Unfortunately, well, it's not unfortunate, it's kind of a good tool that it's not actually included here. You can't change everyone at once to incomplete, and that's kind of just a fail-safe to make sure that we're not giving access to everyone back at the same time to a big batch of artists. So it's important to note that an incomplete status allows an artist to make changes to the application before the call's deadline date, and that the artist's application is ideally automatically moved back to the received status once changes are made. This will make more sense when we talk about how to allow artists to make changes after the call's deadline, but for now, just know incomplete is for before the deadline. So speaking of which, we will now go over the statuses most commonly used after a call's deadline passes. For the purposes of showing you what this looks like, I will just switch over to our other call, which has a deadline in the past. That's our jury by artwork call. Most of the statuses you would see between now and when the jury is complete will be private to you and cannot be seen by the artist. So let me go here, and yeah, I will actually show you that later. Okay. So this means you can move the applications wherever you need without worrying if an artist will see what you're doing. The reviewed status, first up here. The reviewed status is used as a general review and can be helpful if you want to go over the applications before you start jurying and catch any incomplete entries or entries that are ineligible based on your requirements. So let's say you have your batch of artists here and you want to review them. So you'll click on the application ID number to view it, view the application. Once you review it, you can change them to reviewed at the bottom here and click Save. When you are finished reviewing all of the applications, you'll just want to make sure that you move them back into the received status to make sure that they're visible to the jurors. The jurors will not be able to see any application unless it's in the received status. If you know an application is going to be exempt from your jury process, you can put it into exempt from jury. Perhaps this artist is a lifetime member or an organization board member. It's a good placeholder for applications you know that do not need to be scored in the jury. Just remember it's there. If an artist needs to make a change after the call's deadline has passed, you will put them into exception. Again, while incomplete is used before the deadline, exception is used after because you're essentially making an exception to allow them to change their submitted application after the call's deadline is passed. So in that case, you'd be making an exception for them. So the process is the same as what I showed before for the artist updating their information. So you would just go to the artist and receive. If they need to make some changes after the call's deadline, you would put them into the exception status and save change. We'll refresh over here. And you can see exception deadline passed. If you change it to exception, the artist will be able to modify the My CaFÉ entries page. And I can do that here real quick. Just make, let's say they updated their statement, they save. You will see here that there is not an option to change their status to received. Instead, the artist must notify you that they are done making those changes, and then you must manually put them back. So while it says that it's been successfully modified, they can go back to their CaFÉ, and it'll still say exception. You'll have to come back here into exception. You can click on their ID to make sure you see the change. You can see the change that I added there. And then you would just go back and put it back into received. Another status that can be helpful, which can be used during any part of your process, is the other status. Other can be used as a general placeholder or catch-all for applications you need to quickly refer back to. Perhaps you're waiting to hear back from an artist, or you need to check with your team if the application qualifies for your event. This status is helpful to keep yourself organized. You can also, you can go to the flag note here and flag an application, or you can add a comment, check on this app, and you can add a comment there. So that's a little helpful tool. But if you need to flag anything or you need to just put something away for a little bit, you just put it into the other status, and it can be helpful for that. So again, though, if you have anything in there, just make sure everything goes back into received before the jury begins. So we'll now review statuses that you'll use as you begin during your jury process. Again, most of these statuses are not visible to the artist. So we have our call here, and we're going to go to jury. Is the other status visible to the artist? No, it's not. So unless you set your jury status to complete, and I'll show you a couple other exceptions to what artists can see, the other status is not visible. Once the deadline has passed, they will not be able to see. And even if it does say other, depends on the situation, but for the most part, you cannot see it until it's complete. Okay, so I'm going to set our call here to jury status in progress. So most of these statuses, now that you're in your jury process, are not visible to the artist. And I will point out one big exception to this, but for the most part, once you set your jury status to in progress, any change you make to an artist application will not be public, which means you don't have to worry about making a mistake if you invite or not invite someone, or if you change your mind. The jury process is completely behind closed doors, and nothing will be official until you notify your artist of the results. I will show you here, refresh. They will see jury round in progress, and except for the one exception I will mention, they will always just see jury round 1 or jury round 2 in progress, and they cannot see the status of their application. So before you prompt your jurors to begin scoring, you will, like I said, want to make sure that all of the applications were in that received status so that they're available in the jury. You'll have gone through your awaiting payment by check statuses, reviewed statuses, and anything else that you might have used for the meantime, and now everyone is in received for the jury. All right. Starting with the not invited status, this is where you'll begin to put the applications with the lower scores. So we have some demo scores here, and I'll show you what this looks like. After each round of scoring, so let's just say our juror scores this first round, you'll go to step 2 of the jury administration page to change the application status. And we'll briefly go through this process, but if you'd like further information on how to conduct your jury, just be sure to check out our help guides or other videos in the help tab, which you can find conveniently right there. All right, so again, under step 2, you'll go to change app status. All right, and select your categories. We've got multiple here. Just make sure I'm going to do them all at once. And you'll select your threshold, the removal threshold, which is default as the average, and it will show you how many applications will move to the not invited status. So here we'll have 9. So you'll click preview to see all those applications with the scores. You'll see that they'll become not invited, and then you'll just click not invited and confirm. This will move the lower scored applications into the not invited status. So if we go back to events management, our table now has 9 not invited. The 11 remaining are still in the received status. So those are the ones with all of the higher scored applications that will move on to the next round or will be in the final round. So note, while this process is essentially eliminating applications and narrowing down your selections, you can always change an application status back to received. If maybe there was a mistake, you can always change it, or you change it to invited at the end. But just know that it's not as scary as it seems when you are eliminating the lower scored applications. You're simply just changing their status, and everything is still not visible to the artist. So when you're ready to finalize your jury, let's just say that we are done here, you will go to step 3 of the jury administration page, to move your selections that are left, these 11 here, to the invited status. So you'll click on Final Selection and select Categories. Here, your removal threshold, which is now invite threshold, will stay at 0 because you're just moving everybody over. This is our 11 to be invited. You'll click Preview, click Preview, and click Invited. Typically, when you feel your jury is complete, this is what you should end up as, with some in your not invited and some in your invited. All right. Again, even though the invited status holds your final selections, nothing you do before you notify your artist is truly final. So from here, you can move forward and notify them and finish up, but I will go over some other statuses that may also be helpful during your jury process. Got a question here, do we do this in conjunction with the juror? Right, so the juror is simply scoring all of the applications in the received status. They can only see what's in the received status. When they tell you they finished going through all the applications and scoring, it's up to you to then go into the jury administration page and see that they've scored. If you have multiple jurors, that's fine, they'll all have scored. And then when you feel they're ready with that round, you just go to the change app status, and this is only something that you can do. Sometimes people work a little bit closely with jurors, and the jurors can see them do this process if they're physically with them, or if sometimes they have a login. But it's anyone that is the administrator just needs to go through that process. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. All right, back in the events management. If you want to have a wait list of applications that you may need to pull from, you can move them instead of just not invited and invited. You can also put some in the wait list too. If the juror removes too many entries in the final selection, can they go back and add those? Yes, they can always go back. If the juror needs to go back and kind of make some changes, then you would have to try to help them put some of the not invited entries back in the next round for received. You have a couple different options. You can either put what's not invited and invited all back into received, and since their scores will still be saved, you can just change the removal threshold. That's what's great about the threshold there in the preview, is you can go to here. It's not going to show up here, but as you change this removal threshold, it will update. As long as you click update, it'll save how many, and it'll tell you just how many need to go back. So if they do remove too many, you can try to identify which ones were scored kind of more on the higher side of the low scores and put them back into received the next round. And another tool that's helpful for that is the scoring history. So if you see here, I'll select round 1. This will always show up with any round, all of the scoring history, and that will show you, let's say maybe this 4 didn't need to be eliminated and it was, then it can go back, or this 3 or something. So those, you can always go back and use this as a tool to make sure to figure out where the juror might have scored something that got eliminated, but maybe could have stayed in the invited status. So another status that can be helpful is the withdrawn status. If an artist wants to completely withdraw their application from consideration, you can put them into the withdrawn status. An artist may withdraw their status for a variety of reasons. Maybe it's ineligible, or maybe they sold their piece. But remember, when I mentioned the one exception to the rule that nothing can be seen by the artist, this is that exception. When an artist's application is moved to withdrawn, no matter where you are in the jury process, the artist will be able to see their entry marked as withdrawn. So I'm going to show you here. I were a demo artist and invited, and I will say maybe Katie sold her piece and can no longer put it into the exhibition, and she wants you to withdraw. So you will withdraw it and put it in withdrawn. But you'll see here, even though previously jury round 1 is in progress, she couldn't see herself become invited, you can now see that one of her pieces is now withdrawn. It's a good idea, if you have to withdraw a piece without the artist knowing, to first contact the artist and let them know that you will be doing that. That's why if you really need to remove pieces for any other reason, that they're disqualified or something, if you want to be able to notify them in a different way, maybe there's a whole batch of them, you can put them in the other status so it's not visible to them. But if you put them in withdrawn, that's kind of assuming that the artist also knows that you had put it in withdrawn. They will be able to see it, so it's just important to know that. But if you accidentally put one in withdrawn, it's not a big deal, and you can always put it back wherever it was. This is actually in invited. Put it back into invited. All right. So finally, the last batch of statuses I will review are the ones you're most likely to use after you finish jurying, and some other miscellaneous ones that could be helpful. The next three statuses I will discuss are accepted, confirmed, and declined. These are for you organizations who might collect additional fees after you invite your artist. So these can be handling fees or participation fees, and they're most often used by like plein air calls or studio tour calls, other things. These statuses are used in conjunction with the confirmation deadline date, which you would have activated on your call editor. So this call here, oops, my other one. I will show you what this looks like. Again, though, we do have some helpful guides that will help you set this up, or if you need to set it up, you can let us know and we will help you with that. So this is set up to have a confirmation deadline date, and this deadline is the date that the invited artist needs to go back to their entry and accept or reject your invitation. And then if they accept, they have to go back, click purchases, and purchase your additional participation or handling fee or other fee. So when the artist, when you use that and you have invited your artist and they are all in the invited or they're all invited, and then you have it set up to have them accept or reject, and if they accept, in order to pay, once they accept the invitation and pay the additional fee, they will be shown in the accepted status. Here, and we don't have an example today, but it's important to note that there's two steps to accepting and paying. There's the accepting of the invitation, in which they will show in the accepted status, but then there's also the status where they will not have paid, and you'll know that because it won't show the transaction details. So if it doesn't show the transaction details, that means the artist still needs to go back and actually pay the fee. If they reject the application, they'll go into declined. I'll talk more about that in a second. Yeah, so if they do pay and they're in accepted, I think actually I have one, but I don't think it's actually paid. No, I don't. Okay. So if they're in accepted and they did pay, what's a good organizational tool is if you manually put them into confirm. So confirmed, you don't have to move them there, but it's good if you need to keep track of who's paid and who hasn't. You just change their status to confirmed, and it will tell you that they have their participation fee and that they are confirmed for your event. If an artist rejects your invitation, like I said, when using the confirmation deadline function, they will appear in the decline status if they rejected it. So overall, if you're not using confirmation deadline, you'll most likely not use accepted, confirmed, and declined. The last status we will have here is the roster status. While this status is rarely used, it can be helpful if you keep a roster of pre-qualified artists, such as a public art roster or any other just list of artists that you have that you pull from. You would move the artist here after jurying. It's important to note that the roster status, when artists are marked as it, are able to access their application at any time and make changes after the jury is complete and keep their art and information up to date. So this is also visible in the jury administration time. So if you put them into roster, they'll be able to see their status as roster. I don't think they're able to access it until after the jury is complete. If you put them into roster, they can make changes and resubmit and keep it fresh. They can't just simply archive like you do when you put them into invited and non-invited, set your jury to complete, and then the artist can archive. The roster allows them to make changes and save those already submitted and invited applications. All right, this concludes the explanation of all the different statuses used in CaFÉ. I hope you have a better sense of what they mean and how they can be useful depending on the type of call you're running. So thank you for joining our webinar today. We will be emailing each of you a recording of this session for your future reference. I will stay on the line for about 5 or so minutes if anyone has any questions. You can submit those through the chat and I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you for joining us. And if you have any other questions, you can email us at cafehelp@westaf.org. All right. Hi, Rich. So if an artist wants to change the price of their art entry, we change the status to incomplete. And when they change the price, the status automatically changes to received, correct? So if an artist wants to change the price of their entry, received, they will need access to their application to get to change that information on their piece. So you'll change it to incomplete, and then they change the price status, and then they resubmit it. As long as it's before the deadline and they resubmit it, they can change, that'll change their application to received automatically. A couple questions here. So is there a way to add a comment in the review section? Yeah, so you can use the comments. Let's say you're reviewing this one, and there's not really well, you can tag, which is kind of nice. That's kind of used more as organizational, but you can change it to reviewed, saved. Once you go and reviewed, you can then add a comment here, right here. If I have entries in as confirmed, do I eventually have to change those to invited? No, not really. Typically, if you use confirmed, you're using it with that confirmation deadline. And, at that point, you would have them go to, pay, and then they come into accepted. You would put them into confirmed just to make sure that they're there and they're confirmed and they've paid. Then you don't have to change it back to invited. They know what that means. They know that the confirmed means that they've, done the process. And once everyone's in confirmed, you can also then use that batch to then, notify your batch and communicate from there and kind of take your process for your event after that. Can I explain how to tag and how do you interface with the judges? All right, Susan, I'll answer your question first. Tagging kind of is helpful if you have your received statuses here. Let's say you need to tag, you do that in the application. I'm trying to think of a good example of a tag. Maybe you have like your recommended. So you're going to tag everyone that you think is your recommendation that you really like. And you can, it's a quick, okay, recommendation is too big because it's only supposed to be 12 characters, but you can save that and that'll tag them. And then, let's say I go to back here, this was for CaFÉ admin. Let's see, and they were in, I think I still left them in, what was it, even in review? No, I left them in received. You can search by tag. So this one, oh, sorry, I'm really bad at that. Okay, tags, you can then search, so then anyone that has a tag will come here, or you can check mark this, show tag applications only. So if you want for your internal, internal organization to see everyone that you've kind of flagged or tagged a certain way, maybe you're tagging different like levels of, I don't know, something part of your different, you think that this will go best as this part of the event or whatever. You can tag the different ones and see them. Tags aren't seen by the jurors, so that's good to know. Hope that helps. And Terry, I'm not sure I understand your question. How do you interface with the judges? So if you're still there, I'd ask you to clarify. If not, feel free to email us. Yeah, so I can kind of give you a quick rundown, but our jury administration help guide is kind of where you'll want to go to see the different options. So in your jury administration page, depending on how your call is set up, you'll have 2 to 3 different options to see where how the scorecard will look. But before you even do that, you need to make sure you just have your jurors assigned. So you'll go to jurors assigned to this call. You'll add juror, set them up with a username and password and login, and add them. And then back here, I'll go to our other call so you can see. And then they'll go back here. And the scorecard view, you can search the monitor, projection, and gallery. Gallery is only optional if you have a jury by artwork call. But like I said in those help guides, you can see the different screenshots of what these will look like to the jurors. You also have a couple different scoring options, 1 through 7, 1 through 20, and yes, no, and maybe, which is essentially 3, 1, and 2. And you can also set your jury permissions to hide or show certain things. Make sure if you click it, this will hide it. So if I click this here, it'll hide the artist name. And those are some of the settings you'll do all before you let the jurors log in and have access to start scoring. Rich, your question: in our show, we have a set limit of 100 accepted entries. Can the judge tell how many entries have been scored for a certain number? They can tell how many entries have been scored for a certain number. They can see how many have been scored. They will not really be able to see very easily how many will be above or below a threshold like you can. So they'll have to kind of make note of themselves where, how many they may have scored a certain time. They sometimes, if you use yes, no, maybe, they just simply score yes. But there's no kind of result of their scoring without you helping them get a scoring history sheet, which helps to know your threshold. If you run a scoring history report, you can download the Excel and sort it and count up to how many 100 accepted entries would be to find your threshold. So you'll be doing that kind of with the juror, and if you need the juror to score anything differently, or if you just need to accept your threshold at a certain point to get to that 100 accepted entries, the scoring history sheet is really helpful for that. You'll also be able to, I just remembered too, one other thing is they can't, my call is not currently set up, but you can filter by score on this list on the jury administration page. You can say, okay, how many did you score? 5 or whatever, and it'll pull up any of the applications that are scored that number. Do you send out email communications to judges and artists through CaFÉ or outside of the platform? That is up to you. If you want to email them, you can use the Events Communications tab, and you can choose the box that you're doing, so you can notify you're not invited and do that, or you can notify you're invited or any other status. If you want to take it outside of CaFÉ, you're welcome to do that. And in order to pull all the contact information, you would just go to the status box here, and you would download the contact information spreadsheet so you can have all of the emails in one batch and email them through whatever platform you choose. All right, this concludes our time. Thank you all for joining. Really appreciate it. Feel free to email us if you have any additional questions. Like I said, we'll send out a recording of the webinar. And be sure to join us next month. We'll send out an invitation for our March webinar in a couple of weeks.